Hello and welcome back to the Create Stuff podcast. I'm your host, Shaun Saxum, and I have a few quick things before we begin. I want to let you know I've recently started another series titled SCP Authors Anomalies, where I read SCP articles with their authors and we talk about them. I really recommend checking this out if you're a fan of the SCP Wiki or if you want to learn more about it. Also, this was recorded in two parts. The first part was in November of 2021, and the second was in January. You'll probably notice a sudden leap in quality. With that out of the way, enjoy the show. Welcome to the 10th episode of Create Stuff Podcast. I'm your host, Shaun Saxum, and today I am joined by a writer on the SCP Wiki, the Based God, #1 rated salesman, DJKaktus.
Hello, friends. I am DJKaktus. I write things, I talk about things I have written, and then I complain about the people who also talk about things that I have written.
Hell yeah. I don't know why I said #1 rated salesman, but we're gonna ignore that part.
It just
kind of came out of my mouth, honestly.
It's funny. It's an error emulating truth, because I've talked in the past a lot about how when you are a content creator, 90% of the work you do is the actual work of content creation, and then the last 10% is marketing. But the marketing is all anyone really ever cares about, because that is what draws in people who are trying, people who you would want to show your content to. So calling me a salesman is maybe not too far off the mark, but perhaps for a reason that is unintentional.
Definitely unintentional, but I completely feel that, and I get the grind. This is the worst part, but also the most important part. I hate it, but nothing uncommon for content creators. Okay, well, I think a good way to get started. Could you just explain what the SCP Wiki is to anybody who isn't aware?
Oh, baby. Yeah. So, oh man, how even to describe it? So it's a collaborative fiction writing project, right? It was started back in 2008 under, it was originally kind of spawned off of a thread in 4chan, which on the creepy board, and very early on, it was much different than it is now. It was more like a kind of like a monster manual, right? Or at least that is how, probably the most, I wouldn't say apt description, but like the most convenient description. You had effectively a catalog that people could contribute to, of a bunch of different like weird things that were either in the universe or in the the fictional universe of the wiki, and they included things like a set of keys that when you put them into a door, they open up to a bunch of different locations, or a big lizard that you can't kill, or a statue that if you look away from it, it'll break your neck. And these are the kind of things that kind of populated that early set of articles that were contributed to this catalog. And then over time, that developed. And the way it is presented is as a list of series, right? So you have you have a different, the first series is the first 1,000 articles on the wiki, and that includes a lot of the ones people know a lot about, especially from the old days. You've got the lizard that I mentioned before, which is SCP-682. You've got the statue that does the neck breakaroonie, which is 173, the highest rated article on the wiki and the first article on the wiki. And then you've got
reached 7,000, I think.
Yeah, which is nuts. Honestly, it blows my mind. When I joined, I think it was like plus 1,000, which was crazy. Huge. But I've been here a long time, so and it is a project without it is a ship on a sea without a wheel, right? Like, the wiki doesn't have a set direction. There is no outcome, right? There's not a purpose it is attempting to achieve. What the wiki is this, this collaboration of different writers from different backgrounds, different point of views, all contributing to this sort of consensus canon. We talk a lot on the wiki about how there's not a central canon. There's not a central a plot, right? There's not a through line, but there are things that are consistent from articles to articles and from different pieces of prose that get contributed to the wiki over time. And so what then happens is, as people have written over the last 13 years, they have contributed to that kind of growing hive mind kind of thing that has developed on the wiki over time. So in short, it's a collaborative fiction writing project. Anybody can make an account on the wiki. If you can come contribute your ideas. The wiki has kind of like a self-policing quality policy, effectively, where anybody who has an account on the wiki can vote up or down on any article. And articles that reach a certain threshold in the negative are removed after a period of time. And so it is a loose way to police your quality, but it has worked more or less since its inception. And yeah, I mean, it has grown to be a much bigger deal than it was back when it first started. When I joined in 2014, there were just over 2,000 articles on the wiki, and we are well past 6,000 now. We're really picking up steam too. I mean, there are just the cast of characters that has when you talk about people who contribute, and I'm not just talking about writers either. I mean, there's a vast community of different content creators, editors, artists, audio designers, web designers, people who work with the CSS and the native wiki formatting to kind of push the envelope of what is capable within that space, within that fiction, has been really, really impressive and really, really like a joy to be a part of, right? So yeah, we've gotten pretty big. I think it's probably safe to say that we have probably gone from being like a D-list internet project to maybe a low B-list internet project. I think it has surprised me the most over time how people have started to come around, not necessarily come around to the idea of, but like been introduced to the wiki without me knowing about it. Like when the Volgan, everybody knows the Volgan, he does videos about articles written on the wiki. He and I collaborated loosely on a video that he did about one of my articles a couple of months ago. And when I was showing it to my family, because they know kind of what I do here, my youngest brother knew about it right away. And he's like, "Oh, I had no idea that you wrote that thing. I know all about this thing." Right. And that is crazy to me because
that is so cool.
It is weird to me that people know about this without having to be told about it. You know what I mean? So I have enjoyed my time here. I've been here a long time. I plan on being here for a long time. But it is a very cool, very unique project that I don't believe that there's anything else like it anywhere else on the internet.
I could not agree more. When did you first get into it? How long have you been here?
So I guess it's two different answers. So I got into it in 2012. I got linked I was linked to SCP-087, which is the staircase, on Reddit in 2012 when I was in college. And I was enraptured, like from the word go. Like it was it was one of those things where you didn't, I wasn't one of the people who like started reading articles and like, oh my gosh, this is real, and my eyes have been opened. It was never that. It was more, it was a genre of fiction that was set like well into my wheelhouse, right? Like I really enjoyed kind of bite-sized horror fiction and bite-sized weird fiction. And even some of the articles that were longer at the time, like SCP-093, which is the Red Sea object, was the first article that I read that I was like captivated by, right? And a lot of people feel that way about those kind of early articles. There was something, everybody always talks about how there's always one that grabbed you. And for me, it was 093. And then later another one called 455. That is the cargo ship. Those were the first two that really like reached out and kind of got me around the neck, and I was obsessed at the time. And then I went to create an account on the wiki, and I messed it up. I didn't put in the right information, and my account was rejected. And I was so embarrassed by it, I didn't come back for 2 years because I was like, "Oh my gosh, they know that I've done this horrible crime." And what's really funny about it is I'm pretty sure that me being gone for those 2 years is the reason why I'm DJKaktus now and not Dr. Benjamin, because that was the first account I applied under, was Dr. Benjamin. Really? Which, with the benefit of hindsight, good move by me. So when I came back in 2014, I don't know why I came back. I had been kind of reading the wiki kind of off and on for those, in that period of 2 years. And I got pretty familiar with not just, the stuff that was written on the wiki, but I followed the O5 wiki too, which is the staff website. And I kind of followed, the discussions that were happening there. And I went through the forums a lot. I just kind of lurked. And after a while, I just got to the point where I wanted to give it a go. I had some ideas. And so I did. And, with the, that was good for me. I really, the wiki kind of showed up at a time in my life that I really needed something like this. And, being able to contribute in that way, in a creative way in that zone, was a boon, a huge boon to me at the time. I was in a pretty rough spot for a couple of years. And just after I left college, I was working. I wasn't happy. I was, in a pretty dark spot. But the wiki was there, and that was something I could do. And that was something that I found that I was pretty good at. And I really enjoyed writing in that, within that, the confines of what is kind of acceptable on the wiki. I found that to be like a really interesting challenge, right? And so I've been here ever since. So I guess technically, I have been in the zone of the wiki for almost 10 years. But as far as being a member, I've been a member for just over 7.5.
Wow, that is crazy.
Yeah, I know. It's a really long time. Yes. I mean, when I look back on it, it's kind of crazy because, it definitely does not feel like it's been that long. But in all seriousness, it has been the vast majority of my 20s I have spent as a member and an author on the SCP Wiki. And that's kind of a crazy thing to hear myself say. You know what I mean?
I can imagine, yeah.
Yeah.
That's really cool, though. Nice. What was it like when you wrote your first article?
Oh, man.
When I say first, I mean like first article, not the one that's on the wiki right now.
My first article is still up.
Really?
If you can believe it, it has somehow survived. It's SCP-2812. It's called Echoes of Yesterday, and oh man, it's so funny to even think about the difference between then and now, because I've gotten to a point now, after all these years, that I kind of have a pattern, like a rhythm, when I get to writing things for the wiki. In general, it takes me longer now for sure, because I'm trying to do different things, and I'm really trying to be more thoughtful about the things that I write and do more work on the back end to make them better when they finally get on the wiki. But very early on, it also took me a little while for most of those articles because I had no idea what I was doing. My very first article, I decided, I had a couple of different ideas, things that I wanted to try out. But it was tricky for me to, I wanted to do it in such a way that, I had resources to pull from. Like when you're on the wiki, for example, everything on the wiki is licensed under Creative Commons, which is great when you're talking about a collaborative fiction writing project. But it also, you are limited in things that you can pull in because you can't use resources that are also not or that are not also within creative, like licensed under Creative Commons, right? So like pictures are a big one. Like early on, I had no idea where to get images from. I wasn't very good at Photoshop, so I just took pictures of the town that I worked in and used those in my first article. I figured I would write kind of about what I knew, and, write about the town that I was working in at the time. And so I wrote a story about some of those like small towns in Indiana that time has forgot, and people are generally kind of moving away from and moving out of. And the story was about that and about the people who are kind of left there after the fact. And it was, it's been such a long time now. I can't tell you exactly where my head was the whole time, but I can tell you for sure it was kind of a harrowing process. The wiki is much nicer now than it used to be. And not to say that it was a nasty place back then. There were already a lot of people doing really good work to kind of change the culture of the wiki and turn it from less of a den of bastards to like a cool nightclub of bastards. And so, I received a lot of great criticism on that first article. I worked with, a couple people who I ended up being pretty good friends with in the years following that, on that first one. And I remember when I got it up, getting feedback has always been like the reason that I am so excited about posting things. It's like I feel like a lot of people get this impression because of I'm the guy with all the upvotes, which is cool, but like the upvotes don't really mean anything at this point. Comments are way more valuable than upvotes. Seeing people respond to things that you've written or things that you've created in general, I'm sure you feel the same way. I think a lot of content creators will say the same thing. Even if it's negative criticism, I feel such a rush anytime somebody acknowledges something that I have worked on and then responds to it in some way. And I can't really explain where that comes from, but it's been around since the very beginning. And
in fact, I cannot agree more.
It's wild, right? Like it's one of those things where, especially in the first couple of years, when I was writing articles and posting them to the wiki, a lot of times what I would do is I would write them in the morning, write them in the late evening, and then go to bed right after I post them. Because I couldn't, I knew that if I started looking at my comments that would come in, I'd be up all night. I had to go to bed right away. And then when I woke up in the morning, I'd be, awake to see whether or not it was well received or whether or not people hated it. So yeah, I mean, it's just different now than it was back then, right? I definitely was a lot more nervous back then about writing, period. And that first article, it really, people were chill, people were pretty cool about it, but it was a big leap. I'd never written anything like that before. I did a little bit of technical writing in college, but never to the extent that I have written since then in fiction. So it's always, I think it's kind of when you jump into a new activity, what kind of, you're never really sure what kind of response you're going to get. And I feel pretty good about how that all worked out in the grand scheme. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. That's really neat. So you were a little bit of a writer before you started on the wiki, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was an English major, so I wrote a little bit in college. Honestly, the stuff I wrote when I was younger, especially when I was in school, wasn't really that good. I have spoken about this kind of at length elsewhere, but I was kind of a dipshit when I was younger. I was one of those guys who thought my writing was really introspective and really profound. And it took me having to grow up and realize that that's not necessarily the kind of thing people are even aiming for or people even like to read. And I would much rather write things that people find entertaining and fun than things that I think that are profound myself. So, when I was writing in college, a lot of what I was doing was, it was a lot of, me trying to sound smart, I guess is what I'm getting at. And When I started writing for the wiki, I didn't really need to worry about that because, that was not what people. Well, yeah, that's not what people were really looking for. They wanted to be, spooked out by scary monsters or read about some weird things, such and such. And, that was part of the process of me, I think, becoming a more well-developed human being and not just a well-developed writer, is learning that, like, you don't, like, when you're writing for an audience, you should be more focused on what you can provide for the audience than just like, how the writing makes PP feel strong. You know what I mean? Like, which sounds like a dumb thing to say, but like, I'm not out here writing to jerk myself off, is I guess what I'm saying. Apologies if that's a little bit too blue for your channel, but that's kind of what I'm getting at. Like, I do this because I enjoy the response I get back from people. Like, I enjoy people coming to me after the fact and saying like, "Hey, I really like this thing that you wrote. I got a good kick out of this." Or somebody saying, "Hey, that article that you put up the other day was really spooky, and like I love that, and I want to write something like it." Like, that's the kind of stuff that gets me going in the morning, right? Like, that's why I get out of bed, is for when I see people like the Exploring series on YouTube, who does videos of a bunch of different fiction projects, but has done videos of my articles that have millions of views, and people in the comments are talking about like, I really enjoy this. I really responded to this. Like, that is the shit that you put into your veins that just it makes you feel a way. Like, the fact that you are able to, because when I was growing up, when I was younger, a lot of the media franchises, a lot of the media that I consumed when I was younger helped me like develop a personality, right? It helped me develop, things that I think are cool and these my sort of whole worldview, that, and obviously real life too, but being able to contribute to that for somebody else is like, it feels good. And so I write for a bunch of different, but that is, I think, maybe not chief among them, but it's probably in the top 3. Just that it feels good to be able to provide that kind of content to people who enjoy.
Cactus cut out here for a second, and there was a little pause, but then we just kept going right afterwards, in case you're wondering what that weird audio bit is. That's cool. That's a really cool reason to write, and I could totally relate to the feeling of getting like any sort of feedback at all. Just helps so much.
Yeah, like, for sure.
Hey, if you're listening to this, you should comment something down below and maybe leave a rating. Even like any type of criticism, highly appreciated.
Yeah, it is nice for people to see, or it is nice to see that people are, because there's so much stuff out there, right? Like, so many things are being produced in our, in the world of the internet, that having people respond in any way just to sort of like give you that like heads up, like, oh yeah, you're being noticed, is very, very cool.
Yeah, for sure. So can you take me through the process of writing an SCP, like, for you specifically?
Sure.
Like, what is your creative process?
It generally starts with like, what I've told people before is that like my process starts very, very, very small. And it usually just starts with vibes, right? I've talked a lot before about how I've written stuff based off of music that I've heard, but not like based off of lyrics, but more like how a thing makes you feel when you experience it, I guess. With music, a lot of times I'll be listening to a song, and either it'll inspire some kind of memory or evoke some kind of emotion that I just kind of become aware of a feeling that that is either new or profound or just something that feels a certain way. And then what I like to do after that is trying to consider, well, what is it about this feeling that I think is kind of consequential, and what is why am I feeling a certain way about something, and then how can I capture that with fiction, which is kind of a crazy thing, because effectively what you're saying is like, you want to turn your feelings into a story, which, like, so I guess what I'm getting at is that I don't ever start with plot, right? Like it is never an interest to me to kind of, start with where the story needs to go. It always just starts with like, how is the story going to make somebody feel? Like when I'm writing, what I'm trying to do is take an emotion that I've had and put it into somebody else's brain. And I usually just start right at the very beginning. I mean, the SCP format has a kind of regimented intro to it, where you have all the in-universe stuff like the item number, the object class, the description, and all of that. And so I will kind of throw some stuff down there just to get words on the page, and then and go from there and see what happens, right? And a lot of times it is a little more how do I even say it? It's like a lot of times it is less important what I put down early on, as long as I get it out, because the stories just develop over time. And I have been known to rewrite huge sections of almost finished works, because either I didn't like the direction that it was going previously, or I sat down and had a good think about it and was like, well, that's cool, but I could do this instead, and really like that as an idea instead. So, I have been known to and have been criticized before, and fairly so, for writing, leaving some things open when I'm writing, like leaving plot holes open, or leaving some details open. And the reason for that is because I always write front to back, and a lot of times I kind of know where I want the ending of it to be, because I know that, like, if I get to a certain point, I will have captured that feeling. But along the way, some of the details in the middle make it a little messy, or I may change some stuff, and then because I'm fairly disorganized when I'm writing, I will either forget, or go back and change something, and not change it somewhere else. So I would say, as on the whole, my writing process is pretty loose, and that is maybe why it takes me so long now, or at least much longer than it used to get stuff out and like get stuff on paper, because I spend a lot of time working on details and then reworking over details, and then like, oh well, I also need to do this section, but I've put it off now for a month, and now I got to come back to it, and okay, well, what was I trying to do here? And so I run into those issues a lot too. So, and now I'm in the middle of a bigger project that I've been working on for a couple of months, or not a couple of months, I guess now a full year and a half, 2 years or so. And so no longer is it just like the struggle to maintain consistency within the scope of a single article. You're also trying to maintain consistency within the scope of many different articles. And trying to make that happen while also being like interesting to read is hard. And that's why I have a lot of respect for people who write long form fiction that does the same way. I don't know how they do it. I don't know how they have the time to do it. And two, it requires a level of discipline, I think, when you're writing. I don't know that I have yet. That's probably the next big thing that I'm going to have to work on, like as a writer. But yeah, I'd say that's what it is. If you were to ask me how I write things, I would say I'm desperately trying to capture a vibe, and then fighting my own disorganization to make that happen.
Okay, I see. That's really interesting. I feel like the idea of communicating an emotion through a story is something that, like, that's what really sets a story apart from others.
Mm-hmm.
Especially on the wiki. Like, all the best stories, you can, like, say an emotion is associated with them.
Yeah, I mean, that, I feel like that is, like, some, like, the words themselves have value, right? Like, it's writing. It would be silly to argue otherwise. But for my money, if I am trying to, put an idea in somebody's head, I don't want to just put a string of text in their head, right? I want to capture some kind of emotion and then give that to them as a way of, like, I mean, writing is effectively trying to incept somebody else's brain, right? Like you are trying to take an idea that has only ever existed within your own skull, and then using the medium of text and computer magic, put it into somebody else's head and have them experience it the same way that you did. So trying to capture these like trying to capture vibes, right, is the way that the that I have found is the most most productive, most efficient way to try and capture that energy and give it to somebody else.
Okay, all right, very cool. All right, so could you actually take me quickly like through what the bits and pieces of an SCP article are, like the object class, the like number, the special containment procedures, just so people listening have some context?
For sure. The very first in fact, let me pull an article up here real quick so I can kind of go top to bottom.
Good idea.
Let me see here. What are we going to do? We're going to do this one because it's easy. So a lot, at the very top of the article, and I should say this too, the formatting of SCPs has changed pretty dramatically over time. Or the standard formatting. There is still a base formatting that is, kind of the one that is in the guides and the one that a lot of people use if they are fairly new to the wiki. Like these are, it has a lot of the basic stuff in it, right? Where you have at the top, you'll have an item number, and that's just whatever spot that article occupies on the main list, which is the list of SCPs from 1 or 0 down to 600 or 6,999 right now. And the you'll have the item number at the top, and then you have the object class in there as well. There are three primary object classes, or 3 original object classes, I guess is what you can look at them as. Those being Safe, Euclid, and Keter. The object class is kind of an indicator of in universe how difficult is a thing to contain, because the Foundation's stated principle is that they are, as an organization, they are working to keep the paranormal and the paranatural and things within their scope out of the public eye because of, for a variety of reasons, but mostly because they are trying to keep people from being exposed to that, either because they think it is dangerous to the public health, or because they that kind of revelation that they're like spooky monsters and ghosts and shit all over the place would be too much for our society to handle. And different people have different interpretations of that too, but since the stated principle is containment, that containment class is all about like, well, how difficult is it to do this? So safe class articles or safe class anomalies generally are the ones that you can just kind of put them in a box and leave them alone. They won't do anything. Whereas Keter class anomalies are those that will actively attempt to break containment, either consciously or otherwise. And there are many variations on that as well. There is a long list of what are considered esoteric containment classes, which are containment classes that don't fall within that very simple scope. I've used many of them myself. And there are other formatting or other ways that that whole information block is formatted that gives you other options. There's the disruption class, the disruption and risk classes that I use it's called the ACS header that is on a lot of my articles. I think all of my articles now. That it basically just adds additional information about how dangerous is this thing and what is the risk of, like, if it was released, like if it broke containment, what is the risk that it would disrupt general society as a whole. And so you have information like that, and then some people put in other various information at the top. I mean, it's all very like in character, right? It's all in universe. Here's some information about this thing that we think is relevant or interesting narratively. And then there are the containment procedures, which are, an important part of the document in universe, because those are effectively instructions on how to keep something contained, something that is going to be acting in an unusual or anomalous way. But the meat of the article by far is the description and everything that comes afterwards. In 99% of cases, because that's where the story gets told. The description is what is the thing, and what about it is strange or unusual, and then all the different addendums to that description and to the article that come afterwards are really the meat and potatoes of the thing. That's where you tell the story. To use one as an example, the one I have pulled up here right now, SCP 2935 is an article that I wrote a couple years ago. It's called "Oh Death," and the containment procedures for that article, which are unusual in this case, is just a single sentence. The description itself is only 3 paragraphs, but then there are a variety of exploration logs, which are just like transcripts of recordings made by task force agents in investigating this unusual thing. Those transcripts make up by far the majority of the article. In fact, another article that I've written that a lot of people know more about is SCP 1730. It's called "What Happened to Site 19" or Site 13, rather. Excuse me. That article is very, very long. I wrote maybe too much on that article, and it is overwhelmingly exploration logs, and those kind of like log transcripts, right? And it is a little bit of a cop out, I'll admit, because it is easier to tell a narrative when you're doing it in dialogue. I think in a lot of cases, but it's also compelling. I mean, it is compelling to try and write a story using just dialogue, and it is compelling for people to kind of be get a first person look at how events are unfolding. And there are a lot of different things. I mean, people use they use testing logs, like, well, we have this weird thing, we're gonna do a bunch of weird shit to it and see what happens. That is that's part of it. That is a thing that that is a different kind of log that people might include to tell their story. They might have data logs, and they might have audio recordings, and a variety of different things, right? And all of these different aspects of an article are all still trying to do the same thing, which is describe a narrative within a very confined format. So yeah, top to bottom, that is how they usually are laid out. But it would be silly for me to sit here and say like those are the only options. People have done some wild things with the format, especially in the last couple of years as the wiki has kind of developed over time. And one of the things I enjoy the most about the wiki is that it has never been, there are always people who are kind of pushing the boundary of what is considered an article on the main list. And people are never nobody is ever, well, I should say, the people who are there, there's never a shortage of people who are willing to push that boundary instead of sitting there and saying like, oh, well, the format's good enough, let's just leave it as is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. So many articles that just change things up so much, like especially recently, there are even articles that I remember there's one by Randomini where you literally have to type text into the article itself, and that's when it starts showing up.
Yeah, Randomini had a it's Randomini. I know it sounds. He's Australian, so I used to call him Randomini, and he got after me one time. It's like Randama and then as if you were saying it with an Australian accent. Randomini had I think that was one of the first articles that really kind of kicked off that idea that an article doesn't just need to be item class or item number, object class, but bang 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 bang. It could be all kinds of different things. In fact, during the recent SCP-6000 contest that was held at the beginning of this year, there was a huge group project. SCP, I think it's 6500. Let me double check that before I put my foot in my mouth.
I think it is that one. I remember seeing
it. It
I
is 6500.
But
Yes,
I know the Exploring series did like eight videos on it or something.
It is. Yeah, he did. And well deserved too. It's a huge article, and it's presented in a way that is, borderline within the format. But I mean, it is a monumental piece of work. Like the work that went into it is honestly kind of insane. And the, is it like those early articles? Like it is fit neatly within the bonds of that first, those first articles, like the way they are formatted and structured? No, not even remotely. But is it very, very cool? Yes, it's extremely cool. And I think like people sometimes within this community kind of get hung up on the idea of articles being, a certain way. And I think it is more important, especially when you are talking about, writing for an audience, that you have to remember you are trying to entertain people, right? Like you're trying to do something creative in a way that provides a benefit to an audience. And for my money, it is, if I think I can do that more effectively with a story that doesn't fit within the boundaries of the format, then I don't give a shit about the format, right? It is more important to me that I'm able to tell a story in a way that is cool and people like, than it is that I tell a story in a way that fits within a certain set of rules. You know what I mean? Not to say that the rules don't have value, because the rules are effectively a restriction on fiction, by forcing you into a certain kind of confine as you're working on creating a narrative. But the fighting against those rules and finding ways to be creative around them, while still maintaining the general shape of those rules, is one of like the really cool things about writing here, because you always have to be doing that if you want to be pushing the envelope. And that's something that I really, really have enjoyed about being part of this whole thing.
Yeah, it's definitely something I love about the wiki. It's just how things just keep evolving and progressing. Never stays the same.
Yeah, it really doesn't. I mean, if you look at an article written from when I first started back in 2014, how that looks now, compared to how articles look now in general, it is a night and day difference. I mean, and that's not to say that the writing is better or worse. I mean, people have a variety of different opinions about that. But I think in general, it can be said that, authors on the wiki now have a lot more tools that they can use to tell a story the way they want to. And they have a lot more experience. There are a lot more examples of articles that are really, really good in the past on the wiki now than there were, 7 years ago. So, I mean, the wiki has developed considerably since then, and the format has developed the same way.
Yeah, for sure. Also, I want to say real quick, I don't know if it came through or not, but I opened SCP-6500 like on my computer just to look at it, and music started playing. I don't know if that came through I
didn't hear it. But
oh, dang it.
Yeah, I forgot I always forget that there is music there. Because in a lot of cases I have my browser muted. But yes, that if you have not had the opportunity to, audience, you should go read SCP-6500. It's very, very cool.
We'll definitely have to as well. Sounds super cool. Just looking at the format is so neat. Sorry about the noise. Didn't realize it was going to be music. But if you're wondering what those three notes were, that's what that was. But yeah, it's super cool. Definitely adding that to my reading list.
Very cool.
All right. Welcome back to the Create Stuff Podcast. Wait, why am I saying that? Welcome back to the second part of this episode of the Create Stuff Podcast.
No time has passed between the first section and this second section.
It's been like 5 minutes. 5 minutes,
yes,
maybe.
5 minutes. I stepped out of the room and then came back.
That's being generous. That's being generous.
It certainly has not been a month.
No, definitely not. That hasn't been an extremely long length of time. Definitely not. I definitely have not recorded other episodes of this podcast between these two parts.
No, of course not. Why would that be a thing that would ever happen? My schedule is perfect and has no faults.
Okay.
Hello,
well, I
Shaun.
will say, actually... What'd you say?
I said, hello, Shaun.
Hello, Cactus. I will say, I actually meant to tell you this before I started recording, but I'll tell you now on air, why not? I actually interviewed Randomini for this podcast.
Ah, Randomini.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. He had a question he wanted me to ask you, actually.
Oh.
That's how I think I'm gonna start the second half.
That's horrifying.
It is horrifying.
Okay.
The entire interview was really, but, you know.
Yes, it's I did a show with him one time. I shouldn't say I did a show with him. He did a show to me some years ago called The Thing
Randomini is making me do.
Correct.
And I know all about it.
It was one of the more transformative experiences of my life. I didn't realize up until that point truly how much fear a single human can endure all at once, and it really opened my eyes, honestly. All right,
he's gonna love hearing that.
What did he want to know?
He wanted to know when the second season of How to Pronounce Randomini's name is coming out.
Oh God! Oh God! Oh God! Oh God! Not again! I don't know if I could do it again. My bones are still so fragile from the old days.
The old days.
Oh my gosh.
Oh God. Well, listener, this episode is going to come out before that one because it feels like a more natural progression.
Oh.
But you get excited to hear that. It might come out like a week after this one, I think.
I'm going to try
and release these.
A more natural
1 week after the other.
descent into chaos for sure.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Exactly. That interview, it was interesting. Very, very interesting.
Yeah, I imagine it was. All right, let's get into it.
Randomini. Yeah. Okay, so, what elements do you think an SCP article or tale needs to be considered a great article within the context of the wiki?
I think the biggest thing is that you need to be kind of like realistic about what you're trying to accomplish. One of the things I see most frequently that people run into issues with when they're trying to create something big or something that is like, somebody sits down and says, I'm going to write my masterpiece. And then they, are disappointed with whatever they're able to come up with because they're approaching it the wrong way, right? I don't think you should ever sit down and try to write great articles or try and write, I should say, not great articles. Every article should be great, but try and write like bangers, right? Like, this is going to be the next big viral thing. I don't feel like that's the approach you should try and have. I feel like a much healthier approach to that sort of thing is just trying to create like a cohesive narrative that is narratively interesting, right? Like there are a lot of different factors that play into that, and it's subjective, between even different people. But I think the big thing that you can really stress for people is like sit down and just try and tell a story, right? Just try and tell the story that you want to tell. And if that resonates with people, then that's great. But you won't get there by trying to like turn something into something that it's not, right? I've written a bunch of different articles in the past that were, I went into them thinking like, okay, this is going to be my next big thing. And they have floundered because I was approaching it with the wrong kind of headspace, right? I went into it thinking like, I need to do everything I can to make this the next big thing. And then inevitably, if I even got the article out, it would just kind of be disappointing. It didn't do the way I wanted it to do, and then I would get discouraged. And I think that's not a healthy way to approach it, right? I think the better option is to find a way, or find the story that you want to tell the story in an interesting way, and then see what happens. And don't get turned off if it's if it's not performing the way that you want it to, and understand that reactions to things on the wiki are fully fluid, and you can't really predict or nail down what any one reaction to an article is going to be based off of past experiences. But if you were going to ask about a single element that I think needs to be in every article for it to be successful, images. I think images need to be on every single article. It's not that hard, and you don't need to make them. I mean, one of the things that turns me off to an article immediately is opening up a page and not seeing any pictures. And I know that sounds like you can't see any pictures. He needs his picture book, but it's such a way to connect a story with an emotion, or with really anchor the reader in a moment. Because we as humans are very visual in how we engage in memory, and how we engage in storytelling. You're effectively, when you're writing, you're trying to capture an image and put it in somebody's brain, and that's a lot easier, I think, when you actually have a picture on the page. And plus, it's super easy. I wrote an article 3930. It's the Pattern Screamer. And that's an article about nothing. Literally in the article, in the world of the article, is an article about nothing. And it's really hard to find a picture of nothing. So what I did instead was I put in just a picture of some mountains in the region that the article took place in. And that was enough. And honestly, it's one of my favorite pictures in any article that I've put on the wiki, period. And you don't need to be some kind of, Photoshop person or CSS wizard or something to make something that is acceptable and cool. I mean, some of my favorite pictures on the wiki are the ones that are the most understated, and I think that's something that people really need to include. I mean, it's not a deal breaker, obviously. There have been great articles written that don't have that, but if you really want to kind of zhuzh it up in a way that immediately captures people's attention, a good picture will do that.
Okay, good advice. And I think especially the first half of what you said about writing something and not expecting it to be big when you write it. Mm-hmm. I think that applies to honestly any form of content. Because just focusing on making something that'll do well rather than something that actually makes you happy just always leads to misery, usually burnout, stuff like that.
Well, here's the thing about that too, and since we were eventually going to get to this at some point anyway, so I had a big Twitter thread a couple of weeks ago about kind of my experiences with expectations on the wiki, and how for the longest time I was my approach to the wiki was not a healthy one. I when I started getting a little bit of steam behind me, and I got some momentum going here. I started aiming for, okay, this next article needs to reach such and such many upvotes, and I need to be able to, get to such and such place. I want to get to this place on the top overall board for upvotes, and I did that for a long time, multiple years, and that is not good, right? I wasted a lot of time that I could have spent, living my life if I had not been doing that. And it's just not there is a healthy approach to creating any kind of content, right? Where you do it because you enjoy doing it, or because it brings you joy, or because it is something that you enjoy to do in your free time. And that's kind of how I approach it now, right? I have projects that I've been working on for a long time. And, the reason I have taken such a long time to work on them is because I'm not letting those articles, or my expectations for those articles get in the way of my actual life, right? What I do when I'm not here. It's just, it's hard to tell people, especially from the position that I'm in now, because it's easy for me to say the upvotes don't matter, go live your life, and people will say well, but you're the upvote guy, you're the one with, you're number one overall, how can you possibly say that? And what I try and tell people is like, yeah, I can say it from experience that this is the, this is where that leads you. I mean, I spent a lot of unhappy years where I was just sort of masking my own personal issues with, upvotes on the wiki. That little hit of dopamine that you get whenever you see that little number go up. And that's not good. Like that's not a healthy place to be. So now what I tell people is, do it because you like to do it. Do it because it's fun. Don't do it because you're trying to hit a number or, reach some kind of position that you have in mind, because that's just, it's a losing effort. And you will not be happy as a result of it.
Agreed completely.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. How do you get ideas or inspiration for SCPs?
I listen to a lot of music. I people ask me this all the time, and I don't really have a good answer for it, because I think this is one of those things that is, like this, asking somebody where their dreams come from, right? Like when you are, you can't really answer it because you don't know, like those things just sort of pop up spontaneously, right? They appear, and they don't have, you can't say like, well, I thought about such and such during the day and then I had a dream about it. Like that's not really how that works. Those things just kind of generate. But generally how I have answered this question in the past is that what I try and do is, if I am experiencing, and it's the same way with, I watch a lot of movies, I watch a lot of, or listen to a lot of radio, listen to a lot of music, and generally what I'm trying to do is capture an emotion, right? Like what'll happen is I'll watch a movie or listen to some song or whatever, and then I will feel a certain way in like while I'm consuming that media. It will invoke a certain emotion or evoke a certain emotion in me. And then I start thinking like, okay, well, I really enjoyed that. How do I create an article, or how do I write something that helps me feel the same thing that I felt just now when I was, consuming this other piece of media. And so that's how I've done it, kind of, for everything in the past. Like most of the articles that I've written have been inspired either by, an article that I heard or saw somebody else write, or, something else I've read on the wiki, or, just trying to capture a feeling that I had while I was consuming, some other kind of media somewhere else, and then trying to emulate that same feeling elsewhere. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I totally get what you're saying.
I wish I had like that. This is one of the ones that I have the hardest time answering. Like people say, well, where'd you have the idea for this? And I'm like, I honestly don't know. It just like it appeared in my head, right? Like it just showed up one day. Like this is how, some things I have workshopped for a longer, and they've just sort of developed over time. But for the most part, most of the things that I have thought of, or most of the articles that I have, put together in the past, their origin is just a feeling, right? And then just trying to write something that evokes that same feeling.
Right, I totally get what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Super cool. It's actually interesting that you mentioned music, because John Bramblett, who I had on for the 11th episode, I believe,
mm-hmm.
he said pretty much the same thing for how he gets inspiration for art and how he uses colors in his art.
Yeah. I mean, it's
super cool.
It is definitely one of those things that is different from person to person. Everybody kind of, goes into, the creative process in a different way. And it's honestly very cool to, hear people who, not just other writers, but other, like the artists in our community or the people who make music, kind of where everybody's, where all of their, where they come from, like what are they trying to do, and how do they accomplish that? I think it's one of the cooler parts of being here for so long is that I've been exposed to a lot of those different, not just a lot of different people, but a lot of different backgrounds, a lot of different ways of accomplishing that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get what you're saying completely. And if you also, listener, like hearing about that sort of thing, then you are at the right podcast at the moment.
The plug.
The plug.
the plug for the show that you're already listening to.
That you're like at least an hour into by now as well.
Okay.
Okay, what tips do you have for beginning SCP writers?
Beginning SCP writers. Read a lot. Read everything. I mean, as much stuff as you can. When I first started writing here, there was a lot less on the wiki. I mean, I joined just after the SCP 2000 contest, so, there wasn't nearly as much content. And honestly, I think the abundance of content will help in that regard. What I always tell people is go back through the last, 24 months of top rated by month and just kind of pick out articles from the top. I mean, and that's not to say that those top rated articles are the best articles, because rating is kind of a subjective thing and it's not really indicative of quality, but it is maybe the best generalized way to ensure that the thing you're reading is going to be at a certain level of quality. And just go through those and start reading them. I mean, reading those articles, finding how they, finding what their, what, makes them work. And, I try and tell people, like, you can't, it's not just about, writing an article that is cool or has a cool twist or whatever. Like, you need to be able to read something and find out why it is effective in what it's trying to do. And tell me, like, why is it that this article evokes the emotions that it does? Why does it capture the reader's attention the way that it does? And when you can do that, then you can start to apply those same kind of techniques to your own writing. And with writing, for first-time writers, I really think that they need that kind of wealth of knowledge ahead of time and that's not to say that people haven't just dove in straight into it and been successful. I worked with a person a number of years ago who, she said that she wanted to be, write something on the wiki because we had talked about it and she thought it was kind of cool. And so we kind of talked through it a little bit, and she just went out and did it. And it was, a pretty decent article. I contributed very little outside of proofreading, and that was like one of those things where it was cool to see somebody kind of dive into it, even if they don't have the years and years of sitting around in chat, like soaking up all the information you can. If you have a good idea and are a competent writer and can kind of emulate those same techniques and same stylings that other people do in other articles, I think that is a recipe for success here. I mean, it's, I always tell, especially first-time writers, like, pick an article that you really like, and then copy the style. Like, copy all the things in it. Like, if it's got the way an interview log is set up, like, copy that, and then put your own ideas in there. And I'm not telling people to plagiarize anything, obviously, but like finding a way to use training wheels, effectively when you're working on your first article. I mean, you don't even have to post it. Just, put your first article together, shop it around, see what people think, and then use what you've learned from that to, write the next one or the one after that. And don't get discouraged if these things aren't working. There are any number of reasons why people don't respond to things well. The best thing you can do is just try a bunch of different things, find something that works, and then, keep adjusting from there, right?
Yeah, okay, couldn't agree more. I remember I'm like currently working on writing my first SCP article, and I've just been like reading as much stuff as I could possibly find from like different series and different ideas. It helps a lot.
It is easy to get overwhelmed too, like in the with there being just so many articles, and with the the perpetual arms race of formatting tricks or different techniques people are using. It is easy to get overwhelmed, but I always tell people, like, don't try and do too much all at once. Find things that work for you, and then just build off of that progress. I'll tell you right now, the best way to kind of like make a name for yourself here is just get a couple on. Like, just get some on. Like, once people start seeing the secret about the wiki is that there's a lot of content. And I guess it's not a secret, but like the the unwritten or unspoken, like, unfortunate truth of the wiki is that there's just so much being produced there all the time that for readers, a lot of times, they will absolutely look for names, right? They'll look for people whose names they recognize because they feel like that is something that they can, like, see visually that will ensure that they're not wasting their time reading an article that isn't any good. And I don't think it's good for the community, but it is real. We are, a big community at this point, and there is a lot of different media, a lot of different content that people can consume as they come in and out of that community. And people want something reliable. So if they sit down and they're going to spend half an hour reading an article, they don't want it to be, something disappointing. And if they, find a name that they recognize, a name that they know has written other things in the past that they have enjoyed, they are more willing to give it the benefit of the doubt, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Completely fair, and that's kind of how it is in almost any medium nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you go on YouTube and you go to your subscription feed rather than like your home menu usually to see what's good to watch.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not always fair for people. People don't want to feel like they have to play a game to make it work here, right? And I agree.
Right.
I wish there was. I wish I knew what the answer was here, but I don't. And I'm not sure anybody does, or the people who have ideas about how to, kind of change things up here maybe don't have the best intentions for those ideas. But in general, I think that the better option is to just start it small, and go from there. You know what I mean?
Right, agreed completely.
Mm-hmm.
And again, like, if you're writing because you want recognition and like fans and stuff like that, you're gonna have a much more miserable time than if you're writing just because it's something you want to do.
Correct.
And enjoy.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But however, if you do like hearing more about authors and their works and their thoughts on their works, you should check out my other podcast, SCP Authors Anomalous, that I have recently started. It's kind of cool.
The plug again, but for a different show.
I gotta shove them in here somehow. I'll get a few more in here later. Trust me. I actually want to briefly bring that up, though, because you, Mr. Cactus, gave me some very good advice for it. SCP Authors Anomalous, it's very, very cool. You guys should check it out. I essentially have on authors on the SCP Wiki, and we talk about their works, we read their works, and we talk about them. It's super cool.
Yeah, it is. It was, when you described it to me, it was a very cool idea. I cannot wait to see how that one plays out.
Yeah. I will tell you, I'll take this part off, but I will tell you, I did end up going with actually the first half of the idea instead of the second one.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I decided like the second one is still a really cool idea that I would love to do someday, but it would require a lot more production value.
Yeah.
And I feel like a better idea like is if I do like 10 episodes of this, and then I could even like transition it over to that if I really want to. But honestly, I'm just enjoying this a lot.
Yeah,
it's really fun to just talk to authors about their works.
Yeah, it is. It is what, like, even people who are a little bit more reserved in general. I've always found when you start asking them about the things that they create, they really, really open up about it, and that's always fun. Like,
oh yeah,
especially people who are more reserved anyway. I'm obviously not that way. I'm just kind of like this all the time. So this is not anything new for anybody who knows anything about me. But some of the people who I've talked to in the past, like when I did my own show, they were generally pretty quiet people who, once you get them in front of a microphone and start asking them about the things they've written, they could not shut up. It was incredible.
Oh yeah. That's like something. I feel like that's part of the magic of like a podcast like this.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
It's awesome. And actually, okay, well now I have to leave this in because you've given me a brilliant transition. Tell me a little bit more about Cactus Cast.
Oh God. Yeah. I mean, so like it was something that I had wanted to do for a while. Like when I was first reading about articles, or first reading articles back before I even joined the wiki. Like I was like, man, it'd be really cool to get these people on the show and talk to them about like the writing and the process and everything. And it's like I really enjoyed it while I did it, right? Like I enjoyed the process of talking to people. I enjoyed the process of putting together those interviews. I prepared not at all for most of them. I would usually have somebody's author page pulled up and just kind of fling questions at them as they would arise. And I felt like that really worked for what I was trying to do at the time. Just kind of have like an off the cuff. It was not really a staged interview. There was not a lot of forethought that went into it. It was very just kind of like sitting down and chatting briefly about how people felt about different articles that they had written. And man, I did have a good time doing it. But you do something long enough and you develop a certain amount of baggage in doing that. And it got to a point, in that process where I had gone through most of the big ones that I had wanted to do, a lot of those big interviews. Then you get to a point where things change, and you're not sure who would even be interested at that point, or who you could work with anymore. And I don't think it is a I don't regret the where all that came from. Like I don't regret the fact that I think I had a pretty good run on that show. I mean, I did it for 40, 50 episodes or whatever it was, if that many. And I feel like it was great at the time, but I think there are other better people who could do that than me. People who will prepare a little bit more, and have the kind of enthusiasm for. And at the same time, life kind of caught up, and I had, a bunch of stuff going on, IRL at the time. Those were some weird years for me, and it was unsustainable.
Right.
It was unsustainable. So I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the process. I like having those available for people, and every now and then I'll still have people who come and ask me about I listened to such and such interview, and I really enjoyed this question, and it's funny to me now because they're talking about something that happened 7 years ago, and I'm like, oh my god. And they're like, yeah, you mentioned this about this article, what did you mean there? And I'm like, well, first of all, I forgot that I wrote that article, and second of all, I fully forget the context of that interview. Like, it just happened such a long time ago. So, yeah, I think that I think it is a cool process. I really enjoy, people who I really enjoy listening to those kind of shows. I'm glad there are other people who've kind of picked up that mantle, and yeah, I mean, it is. I was not the first at all. I think Toad King was doing his show before I did mine. I don't think mine was the best by far, and I'm glad that there are other good shows that are doing something similar since then. It is very rewarding for me to watch other people kind of pick that ball up and run with it.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying. I remember, tell me if you agree with this or not. I feel like Discovering SCP by Darnell and Tanhoney kind of seems like a spiritual successor to Cactus Cast in a way.
It certainly has the same kind of chaotic energy that show had. I really, really enjoy their show. I listen to as many episodes that I have been in that as I can, and then none of the rest of them. Oh man, Tanhoney and Darnell have such good energy. Like
Agreed.
they and it's funny too because Darnell is somehow not like the straight man of the whole thing. He definitely brings like a certain zhuzh to the whole deal that is just intoxicating to listen to. And it's the whole thing is, I'm going to tell you something about that show that I think is kind of funny. And I'm glad now that people are finally waking up to see how brilliant that show is. Because one of the first times I was on, I don't know if they'd had too many other guests before me. And they were talking about talk about like, oh well, so and so could, we wish we had so and so on here, and I made some comment about like, well, Tanhoney, why don't you just go talk to them? And what's wild about it is that Tanhoney apparently does not realize that he's like the number 4 overall guy. Like he acts, in a way that is so much different than the other, type A assholes on the top of that, the ratings list, myself included. And like that, like being in the, listening to him talk about articles, especially when he like cuts out the, when he turns off the chaotic energy for a moment and just like starts talking about writing and sort of his, his experience with it is really, really cool. And he's a really, really good author. And the two of them together, Darnell kind of, leading the ship and Tanhoney being cryptic and horrifying. Oh man, it is a really, really good show. I would say of the current programming, that is kind of out there right now, yes, you're probably right. I think that one is the closest to a spiritual successor. And if that's the case, then I am glad, because that is as good a successor as I could have ever hoped for. Their show is awesome.
Hell yeah, I love discovering SCP so much. First episode of SCP Authors Anomalous I did, which is what I decided to call that show I talked about, was actually with Tanhoney and Darnell. And I think it's like, oh, it was so fun. Honestly, it might be the best episode of the entire thing still, even after I've made 4 of them.
They are a very cool tandem, the two of them together.
Oh yeah.
And I have really enjoyed my interactions with them, over the last couple the last couple of months. They have been, they are such a cool duo, and I'm really glad people are, like I said, I'm really glad people are finally figuring it out. Like they deserve every bit of the cred they're getting for this right now.
Oh yeah, agreed. I'm very much looking forward to working with them in the future on other content too. I really want to.
Yeah, same.
Okay. So do you have any, I think I already know the answer from what you said, but do you have any plans to ever bring Cactus Cast back?
No. I mean, not at this point. I have gotten to, I'm much less active now, than I have been, in the past. Not, in this community, writing in general. And I think a lot of it is because, life catches up to you, right? You're trying to, balance doing, doing the work of, writing with doing the work of, being an adult in, the year of our Lord 2022, right?
Right.
So it's difficult for me to, say any kind of thing concretely. Like the things that I want to work on, I'm still working on, the Project Paragon stuff that I've been doing for a long time. I have a couple of other articles of varying sizes that I've wanted to kind of to focus on. And all of that is stuff that I, those things are kind of my priority now, as I've kind of gotten, to this place where I'm at now.
Right.
And I don't want to do anything that would distract too much from that, especially because like now I've got a Patreon, right? Like I've got people who are throwing me some cash every month in the hopes that I will put together something decent for them, like some decent content, and I want to try and meet those expectations, and not let those people down. So being able to do that and a show at the same time, I'm not sure if I can do both. There was probably
understandable.
It would be very easy for me, like the DJKaktus of just a couple years ago, to say like, oh yeah, like I can accomplish, I can do everything all at once, and then fail at doing or do just a bunch of things kind of half-assed, and yeah, I don't think I can. I don't think I kind of have to be like realistic with myself about what I can and can't do at this point. and kind of focus on the things that mean the most to me. So I'm gonna say no. It would be fun, but yeah, I think the time, like I said, I think I've enjoyed watching other people kind of run with that as an idea so much that I would not want to do anything that kind of rains on their parade. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I get what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
I totally understand. Managing your time is super hard, and like especially for creative people, it's so easy to want to start so many different projects up. But you just have to be careful about which ones you actually choose, because the more you have, the less time you can devote to the others.
Yeah, well, you know, and I very much like, you know, I enjoy, and this is true. I enjoy going on interviews or going on podcasts more than I liked hosting them, because I have a much easier time. Like I clearly can't stop talking, right? Like I cannot stop running my mouth, and it's a lot easier for me to, you know, play that off as normal when I am being interviewed, as opposed to when I am doing the interview and I have to sit back and shut up and listen to what people say. And so it is easier for me to come on shows than it is for me to host my own. So I probably I think at this point in my life, I'm going to leave that to the young people and kind of retire to just enjoying shows as they come up.
All right, fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so one thing you actually brought up briefly in that answer, what is the... Oh, wow. All right, the name just left me completely. What is Project Paragon?
Oh, Project Paragon. I started, so a couple of years ago. Oh man, how much shade do I want to throw? How much shade do I want to throw for this thing?
Make this really controversial. Come on.
Yeah. Okay.
Let's get the community talking. Let's get them mad.
So, Bright. A number of years ago, the opportunity came up to rewrite, or because there was an article that Bright had written. It's called "The Jack of Hearts," and it was a really, really shitty article about this this gremlin thing, or maybe it was a satyr. I can't remember exactly. But it was a shitty little satyr that raped people. Yeah. I mean, it was pretty horrible. I'm not gonna mince words here. That thing was a piece of shit, and he loved it for some reason. I mean, who truly can say why? But you know, it started to drop eventually in rating because people realized that it was dog shit, and I came along and I had this idea for. This article, this thing that I had wanted to, you know, this kind of reimagining of that article. Like I wanted to take out all of the sexual assault, obviously, because that's not very cash money. Yeah, and
that's a way of saying it.
Yeah, for sure. So I, I put together this draft, and effectively what it was a jack, or it was a demon, basically, that was like this big sort of invisible monstrosity, and I kind of had this cool picture for it, and this thing it was like influencing birth rates within a certain town in Alabama. Like, you know, because one of the things that I saw a lot of while I was working in Indiana, in like a small town in southern Indiana, was, you know, a bunch of, you know, especially young girls who had young boyfriends who would get pregnant, and then, like, you know, they couldn't really take care of a kid like that. You know, they either did not have access to contraceptives, or they, you know, or birth planning or anything like that. So then they, you know, just have these kids. And, you know, that is one of the fastest way to kind of depress, you know, the youth of a region, is to kind of lock them down with, you know, kids that they can't take care of, that then get passed on to, you know, their parents, or, you know, the kids' grandparents or whatever. You know, it's just not a very fortunate scene for anybody.
Right.
And I wanted to kind of write an article that kind of expanded about that and how that process works, like why that is a thing that was happening in a certain region. And I actually thought the article was pretty cool. And I showed it to Bright, and he said, "Oh yeah, it's fine, but like it doesn't have anything to do with the original article. So no, I'm not gonna. It's not. That's you can post it, but it's not a rewrite." And I'm like, "Oh, okay. Like, well, I didn't want to tell him like the reason that the original article was such a piece of shit was because it was like the way it is. Like you wanted to write something differently because the one that you wrote was ass." But he was too much of a dipshit to realize that. And eventually his article was deleted because it was a piece of trash. Like a lot of other things he wrote back then. It was a piece of garbage.
Wow.
Yeah. Anyway.
God.
So I ended up
not mincing words here.
No, not at all. And so I ended up posting my version. It was called The Demon Lancelot. And I eventually changed the name to The Demon Lancelot in the Valley of Lust. Once I started to develop a pattern elsewhere. And what I found out while I was doing, because so his article was called The Jack of Hearts. And I'm like, man, it'd be cool to kind of do like one of these kind of demon articles for each suit in a deck of cards. Now, I don't know if you know this. I'm going to tell you now, and it's probably evident to a lot of people who have read my articles. In a deck of cards, right, each of the jacks, or each of the face cards, historically, has been based off of a different real life person, right? In fact,
I did not know that.
I'm going to tell you exactly who they all are here real quick.
Okay.
Okay, so the 4 kings in a deck of cards are David, the king of Israel, Alexander the Great, Charlemagne, and then Augustus, like Caesar Augustus. The queens in a deck of cards are, let's see if I can find them here real quick, are Judith, Rachel, Pallas, and Argine. Those are all, the first 2 are biblical figures. Pallas is related to the goddess Athena, and then Argine is an anagram of Regina, which is Latin for queen. Those are the hearts, diamonds, spades, and clubs queens. And then for the jacks are Lancelot, Hector of Troy, Ogier the Dane, and who is the 4th? Who am I missing? Lahir. And it was not Demon Lancelot was the first one. Sorry, Lahir was the first one. That was the Jack of Hearts in my article. So you have Lahir, Lancelot, Hector, and Ogier, and I decided I wanted to write an article about, an article per suit, and it would just be like these 4 unrelated demons, and that would be kind of a cool thing to do. So I did the first one, and people responded to it pretty well. I mean, but it was just kind of a throwaway article, right? It didn't really mean anything. And then, so many years ago, when I was just a young man, some friends and I used to play this. It was kind of like a pseudo knockoff tabletop RNG, or like RPG that we kind of did like it was like a forum game in the old internet, like in the olden days. And there weren't really any rules. It was just a lot of us being like, yeah, well, no, my guy's stronger. But we inadvertently created like an interesting lore when we did that. And a lot of that stuff is gone now, except for like some notes that I had saved from back then. And so I wanted a way to kind of immortalize some of those ideas. And I was thinking about how I could do it and how I could have it make sense. And then I realized like, oh, well, I can write another one of those demon articles and kind of set that in that universe, right? Where those things were all real. So the second article that I wrote was The Demon Lancelot and the Flying City of Autopapadopolis. And that introduced a lot of things from that old universe. It introduced a lot of named characters from back then that we talked. We had worked with, like the Dragon Barada and the Deva Lord Relevine and the Lord Arcturus and all these different characters that my friends and I played with when we were kids, but kind of stylized in a way that made a little bit more sense. And then at the same time, I used that to introduce some like bigger world building things that I had been working on for a long time. Like that was when I introduced the idea that like the two primordial, the original two gods sort of in the SCP universe are is and is not. They are the kind of what is, what shall be, what shall, or what was not, or that this kind of idea that like there are two different for like fundamental forces, and that those forces are what is and what will not be, and that kind of plays in too with like my whole like some established lore that I'd already kind of put together briefly. About like the Wanderer's Library and the Serpent in the Wanderer's Library versus Ananta Shisha, the big eel in SCP-3000, and other stuff too. Like there are other elements of that I had worked into it. Some things that showed up in my third 001 proposal, the way it ends. It was just a melting pot of different ideas, and people really liked that one. And it kind of it created a kind of cool following. And then sometime afterwards, the Exploring series did a video about that article, and it was an extremely cool video, and because up until that point, I never really considered it like a series. It was just like, oh, these are some cool ideas that I kind of want to put in one article and see what happens. It was like a one-off. And I'd also done some other things. Like I wrote an article called Wrath that was about some like fairy demons, and but none of it was really tied together at that point. It was all just a bunch of these different ideas. And when I listened to his video, or watched his video rather, and listened to what he had to say about it, he made a comment where he said something along the lines of like, this is like Dark Souls in the SCP universe. And I had never played Dark Souls at that point. So I'm like, oh, okay, well, I guess I need to play Dark Souls now and see what this is all about. So I went and played Dark Souls, and now it's my favorite series of games ever.
Love Dark Souls.
Yeah, I burned through Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3 in the span of like 8 months. And I think I've got like 5,000 hours, something stupid, in Dark Souls 3 now.
Jeez.
Yeah, and like it very much. And when I finished, I was like, oh, yeah. I mean, that's this. Yes, that is correct. He is right. That is what I'm doing here. I mean, it was inadvertent, but like that's absolutely what I was doing. So then I was like, okay, well, I need to formalize this. Like, I need to make something of it. So the next article that I wrote was one that I had kind of been writing for a long time, but it was never really in the how do I say this? So to take another step back, a number of years ago, I wrote an article called or it was actually a rewrite of an article called Titanius Prison. And it was an article set in the jungles of South America, where there was like an ancient prison that was built by the Bigfoots, SCP-1000. And again, there was nothing in there that was tied to any other lore. It was just kind of a one-off. But I started looking at that article at one point. I was like, man, it would be really cool to connect this to something else. Like, why don't we ever really explain what Titania is? So I had this idea that I was going to write an article about a big tree, and the big tree was going to be Titania. So I had an image for it and everything, and then the SCP 6000 contest was announced, and it was like, I don't remember exactly what it was, like a folklore contest? No, it wasn't folklore. It was fantasy, I think maybe. I think it was a fantasy contest. And
I think that's right.
Yeah, and so I decided I was going to do like that was when I wrote that article and finally kind of put it all together. That was the one where I was like, okay, this is how this is going to be. Like I'm actually going to sit down and make this a thing. And so I wrote the Demon Hector and the Dread Titania. And that article did stacks. It was really, really, really good. Or rather, it was really, like, it felt good. It was important for me to, kind of get it all together, put it all in the same place, and really give me something I could build off of. And that's when I made Project Paragon, right? Where the Foundation is suddenly realizing that there are all of these things that are kind of cropping up in, the real world, or the real world, in the modern world, that are indescribibly ancient. Like the things that took place in, SCP 4840, whichever one Wrath is. I can't remember off the top of my head. Those things took place like tens of thousands of years ago, right? Like I've described the entire series as being an antediluvian series because, like, in this universe, the Great Flood happened, right? Like the biblical Great Flood that is also described in other kind of texts. Like this thing occurred, but it wasn't, for the reasons that are mentioned elsewhere. It was because there was a sorcerer named Noah, who caused the skies to open up, and there are these ancient kings and these great empires, the Daevites and the fairies, the humans, the long men, like all of these different what I was able to do just by shoving the entire timeline back 20,000-30,000 years was effectively allow myself to write fantasy within the SCP universe, which I guess is what I always wanted to do because I'm having a blast doing it. It was very, very fun. Like it was very, very fun to be able to accomplish that. People have really responded to it really well. People seem to really, really like that as a concept. And I have a lot of things planned for that series. The one I'm going to be releasing soon is the one people have been asking about for such a long time. It's the Demon Ogier and the Bloody Throne of Maladrug. That one I'm really excited about. This is probably the thing that I'm going to continue to write for the foreseeable future. I'll still have a couple of smaller articles here and there, and I've written 2 things since then that have both been small. I mean, they're not bangers or anything. They're just sort of like ideas that I've had kind of thrown out there. I wrote the last one in just a couple of hours, but just to kind of keep things fresh. But these articles, in talking about the ones that I'm going to be writing that are kind of the bigger deal kind of things, it's basically, I think, just going to be this for the foreseeable future, just because of like how much I enjoy writing it and how much people have responded to it, and the kind of stories I feel like you can still tell within that space. I think that's all very cool. So that's what Project Paragon is. Ta-da!
Neat.
Yeah,
Super cool.
Sorry, I know I talked for like 20 minutes just now about that.
That's okay.
This is easily the thing that I am like the most passionate about right now. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can definitely tell. That is super cool. I'm very much looking forward to reading some of it.
Okay. Yeah, no, I mean it's fun, man. It's the Exploring series, or his videos on those articles are honestly, I think, in a lot of ways better than the articles themselves. His insight has been honestly really important. And I have told him before too that what is so important to me is being able to see kind of that, that getting that kind of insight from him, to really help flesh out some of those ideas, I think has been really important for me.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, super cool. All right, I have just 2 more questions to ask.
Go for it.
Okay. How do you feel about the current state of the wiki?
It's hard to say. Like, I think the wiki's in a good spot, but I think it could be in a better spot.
I think part of one of the reasons the wiki has suffered a little bit in terms of I don't want to be super boomer about it, but I think overall quality has slipped a little bit, and I think part of it is because our standard for deletions got real low, was really low for a long time.
Really?
Or not, sorry, it was high for a long time. It was, you had to drop below -10. That's pretty low. And there are just so many people in this community now that, anybody with a handful of friends to upvote their first article could kind of get it over that like +10 hump, and then it just kind of languishes there. And again, I want to be very clear. I don't think upvotes are a measure of quality. I don't think that they are indicative of anything other than the amount of attention something gets. That being said, it is a very easy way to kind of get a general idea of how, like, what kind of quality something has. There are always going to be exceptions to that, but I think it is the best way we have currently to do that. With that being said, there are just a lot of things that are just sort of and they just kind of languish, and they're just not that great. I don't know what the answer to that is. I fully cannot be the kind of person. I cannot be the guy who is like making suggestions there, because like my position is so privileged within the community. Like, it would not make any sense for me to come out and be like, yeah, we need to raise the fucking the deletion range, because that makes sense. Like, people would not like that very much, and I don't think it's my place to say that anyway. So that is is it something that can be easily fixed? I don't really know. Like, I don't know what the correct answer is here. But the what I do know is that we are, I think the wiki is not in a bad spot. I mean, I feel like there are still great people who are still, great. There's still great writing happening on the wiki. I just worry sometimes that it is being kind of overshadowed by, just a wide variety of that gets posted. You know what I mean?
I totally get what you're saying. Yeah.
And I don't want to say that all and sound kind of cruel in doing it, and I don't mean offense to anybody specifically. I just, those are the kind of things that, become apparent when you are, because even now, after all this time, I don't participate with the community or contribute to the community as much as I have in the past, but I still read a lot of articles as I see them get posted. And thankfully, most of the ones that I have seen are pretty good. But I know that underneath all of that, there are just a lot that get posted, a handful a week, if not more, that are just kind of middling, and they're fine. But they're, I wish we had a better way to kind of address that issue and address like the inflation of the wiki right now. Like, we're not running out of slots or anything, but I kind of wish that was not a question that came up very often. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
I get you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I 100% agree with you there.
So what else you got?
Okay. Actually, I think this is about a good time to start wrapping this up.
Okay.
I have just one last question. This is what I ask every guest I have on this podcast.
Sure.
For any creators listening in, what is one piece of advice you have?
One piece of advice
about creating art or writing or anything.
About creating art or writing or anything. If I was going to give somebody one solid piece of advice, like the one thing that I have come back to over and over again, it is that it is very easy to get distracted, right? It's very easy to get kind of lost in the politics of a thing, or in the all the different, because writing isn't something that you do in a bubble. There's always going to be other voices that you hear, and other other aspects of the craft that kind of get in the way of telling a story, or painting a painting, or creating some musical work of art or something. And there's always going to be noise, right? And you can't get rid of the noise. Like, the noise is ever present, right? There are always going to be other voices or other contributing factors that kind of like, drown you out. And my best advice to anybody who kind of gets caught up in that cycle of noise is to like just take time off, right? Like just take time. Honestly, and this sounds like a kind of a dumb, simple thing, but back a number of years ago, I started writing an article that was going to be the follow-up to Megalomania, the Donald Trump article that I wrote back in, I don't know, 2019, whatever it was, 2020. And the article that I was going to write was called The Monolith. And I was really excited about it, and I worked on it for a long time, and then I got writer's block, and I couldn't do anything with it. And my brain fully shut off. And I didn't write anything for almost 6 full months. Just could not put words to page. And it was one of the more like depressing parts of my writing life here, because like I thought I just lost it. Whatever the muse was, wherever I got all that stuff from, I thought it was just gone. So I took some time off, and I went and did other things. Like, I stopped fretting about it. I stopped worrying about it. I went and, played with my cats, or, went out and went to my parents' place, and every now and then I would sit down at the computer, and if there was something there, I would put it on page. If there wasn't anything there, I would leave and go do something else. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And for me, I think that was what I was, that was the biggest deal for me, was this idea that, I could, take the time to kind of get my head right, and not spend all of that time worrying about, people are going to be worried about this deadline or that deadline or anything like that. And the next thing I wrote after that was the Demon Hector. And it placed second in the SCP-6000 contest. So it must not have been too bad,
Yeah, definitely not.
So that is my advice. You're always going to find, that if you get into a situation where you're being overwhelmed by noise and overwhelmed by the things that are distracting you from the thing that you're working on, just don't work on it. Go do something else. Like, this is not your life, right? It can be, there's nothing wrong with, art being your passion. That's great, but there's a lot of other things to do out there. And I know a lot of people be like, well, this is the only thing I care about, and that's fine. I'm not criticizing anybody who is deeply passionate about the work that they do. But I like it as a matter of personal opinion, I do not think that your art, your passion should take away from like the actual years of your life that you are given before you die. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So,
agreed.
That is my advice.
All right, great advice. I could not agree more.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. All right, thank you all so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Stay tuned for our next episode, which will be another episode related to the SCP Wiki with Random and I, as we have mentioned a few times in this, I think.
Yes.
And
horrifying.
Yeah, and then yes, it is a terrifying episode.
Yes, indeed.
Prepare yourself mentally.
Very spooky.
But and after that, you can also expect another SCP-related episode that I'm planning out. That'll be pretty cool, featuring some, actually, in the animatic special kind of style I did, featuring 3 very cool SCP authors. This is my first time ever mentioning this anywhere. If you're listening to this far, now you get the secret info. There you go.
Woo!
Yeah. All right, thank you all so much for coming. I'll see you guys next time.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Shaun. See you guys.
Hey, thanks so much for listening to the 12th episode of the Create Stuff Podcast. I'm your host, Shaun Saxum, and this is the conclusion. I don't know why I bothered saying that. You probably already figured that part out. Okay, nice. Why do I sound like I'm in a hospital? Jeez. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Big thank you to my guest DJKaktus for coming on. That was super cool. If you guys want to check out the SCP Wiki, especially if you've never been on it yourself or if you've never read any articles on there, I highly, highly recommend you check it out. Look in the description. I linked some articles that we talked about during this, and also DJKaktus's entire list of articles down there, and you guys should go check them out. He's a really good author. There is a reason he is the top-rated author on the Wiki. It is well deserved. As this is an SCP-themed episode of the podcast, I also have 3 recommendations for some cool things you guys should check out related to the SCP Wiki. First off, well, okay, this one doesn't actually count as one of like my 3 things that I'm recommending from other people because this is from myself, but you should check out SCP Authors Anomalous because it's really, really fun. I'm enjoying it a lot. More episodes are coming out of that. There should be like 3 up at the moment. 4th one has already been recorded and is going up soon. 5th one and 6th one are both in the cycle, waiting to be recorded. We did talk a little bit about discovering SCP. You guys should also check that out. Link will be in the description. I think I might have also mentioned that one in Randomized episode, which I actually recorded before this one, or in the middle of this one, sort of. So if I repeat that there, sorry, but it's really, really good. Anyways, you guys should go check it out. It's worth 2 recommendations. And I also have 3 recommendations for other podcasts that DJKaktus personally recommended to me that relate to the SCP Wiki. This is a fun little podcast hosted by Rounderhouse, a big writer on the SCP Wiki, including multiple guests, including Jack Dragon X. I actually just recently had both of them on SCP Authors Anomalous. They're very fun people. The podcast is really just like chaotic and fun to listen to. I enjoy it a lot. I just always go there, and it's just always a fun time. And they also stream their recordings live, which is cool. They're fun. I really recommend. I think I actually, now that I'm reading this out, I'm actually not going to recommend an episode because I think I recommended an episode in Randomized. I think I recommended this in Randomized interview too, and I already said a specific episode I recommend there. So yeah, but go check it out. It's cool. It's very cool. Just choose an episode. It's good, I promise. It's still starting out, so there isn't much to choose from. So I struggled to actually give a recommendation because I like them all. You know what? DJKaktus was on their 3rd episode. That's the one I recommend. 3rd episode. I'm pretty sure it's the 3rd episode. It's the one where they played Uno. Go check that out. The second one I would like to recommend, or 3rd if you count SCP Authors Anomalous, is Foundation After Midnight Radio. This is just a really, really cool podcast set in universe in the SCP Foundation. It is the SCP Foundation broadcasting their news like it was a radio show to other members of the SCP Foundation. It's really, really cool. I haven't listened to a ton of it yet, but I've enjoyed a lot what I have listened to. Definitely go check that out if you're looking for something that's really cool and in universe, like just a really awesome story. And the last one I would like to recommend, I have not actually personally listened to this, but Cactus recommended it, and it looks really, really cool from what little I have seen. Find Us Alive is another in-universe thing that details like these. I'm pretty sure, you know what, I'll just give you the little synopsis that they have on their page. Find Us Alive follows the strange developments at Site-107, a small Foundation research site trapped inside dimensional anomaly SCP-6320, as narrated by the site's radio operator, Dr. Harley. Super cool in-universe show. Once again, I really highly recommend checking it out. Again, I haven't listened to it yet, but I am so excited to because that sounds so cool. And honestly, their logo is just automatically excites me a lot because it's just really, really neat looking. Yeah, definitely check all of these out. They are super good podcasts, every single one of them, really worth your time, and they could also just really use some more attention. Yeah, thank you so much for listening this far in. I appreciate it a ton. I'm your host, Shaun Saxum, and I will see you guys next time.